Welcome back, welcome back. Who runs Russia? It's approaching the first anniversary of President Medvedev's ascension to the top job. But many believe that it's the former president and now Prime Minister Vladimir Putin who still holds the whip hand. With me to give his view, his concerned and expert view, is Edward Lucas, the author of The New Cold War, and he's also the Economist's Central and Eastern European correspondent. Edward, welcome. Top of the day.
Hello.
Starting with the basic question that comes up because of Georgia and other things, is the balance of power between these two men, Medvedev and Putin, what the world generally thinks, or has the world got it wrong?
I think that Putin still clearly runs Russia. There's no doubt about that. He's not just the head of government, he's also the dominant personality in the sort of Putin-Medvedev duo. I think what's changed is that Mr. Medvedev and his advisors have become a little bit more vocal in criticising both what's gone wrong in the past and what's happening right now.
Well, particularly the economy and so on.
Absolutely, because the record of the 8 Putin years on the economy is really pretty poor, and people around Medvedev have pointed that out. Even a year ago they were saying, we have to admit, no new roads, no new hospitals, no new power stations, all this oil and gas money hasn't really done very much. But now with the economic crisis biting, the criticisms become a little bit tougher. And equally on Putin's side, there are people who are saying there's been a lot too much liberalism, too much free market economics here, and that's a kind of veiled criticism of some of the people around Medvedev.
Does that mean that, I mean, people were very respectful in the West and so on and around the world about Putin's Russia and about the strength, the new economic strength of Putin's Russia? They exaggerated that, did they?
Absolutely. That was Emperor's New Clothes. And what happened was that the oil price shot up, Russia was awash with money, and it was able, therefore, to afford to do some things. Lots of glitzy high-rise buildings in Moscow, new shopping malls, a big increase in defence spending. All that was basically paid for by the oil money. It wasn't the result of Russia diversifying into really sustainable things. The other thing that Putin brought, which is quite important, was stability. And we'd had the chaos of the Yeltsin years and all the humiliation that brought. And so Putin, as a strong guy, was seen as running Russia more effectively. But the problem with that was that it was stability without stabilizers. He got out of the way the courts, the legal system, the press, the non-governmental organizations, all the things that make a country stable in the long run. And he systematically knocked those out. It was a bit like a man driving a car, and whenever he sees something he doesn't like on the instrument panel, he smashes it with a hammer. In the end, you're going to crash, and that's what's happened.
And that's what's happened. And now, with, as you say, Medvedev and his advisors and so on, daring to criticize Putin, what does that do to the relationship between the two men? Is it a happy marriage, an unhappy marriage? Is a divorce on the cards?
It's a marriage that has become more visibly unhappy. I think when they first came in, there was a very choreographed attempt to make out that they were just best buddies and everything was fine. And if you like, that was the honeymoon, and now it's moved into a marriage where there are clearly some disagreements. There's other things they agree on very much, and sometimes you read Medvedev's speeches and you think that's pure Putin, and you read Putin's speeches and you think that could just as well be Medvedev. So it's not, I wouldn't say we're moving towards an acrimonious divorce, but there is a real difference of opinion on some things, and in a way that's normal. You have that in other countries too. You know, Mr. Sarkozy doesn't always agree with the French Prime Minister on everything. But I think that in Russia it's potentially very worrying because Russia is inherently so unstable, because it doesn't have the institutions of power that keep a country on the right path.
So do you think that when it comes time to decide whether Medvedev goes for a second term or makes way for Mr. Putin to return, which will he do?
I suspect that decision is still basically with Putin, and there's been a theory, put it no more than that Putin basically wants to leave power. He wants to go and enjoy the rest of his life away from the routine of daily political life, which he doesn't like very much.
Doing more of this sort of thing? Doing
more of this sort of thing, exactly, and everything that goes with it. And that's reasonable. He's young enough to be able to enjoy that sort of thing, to put it mildly. But there's some suggestion that people around him don't want him to go. They see him as the factor of stability, and they worry about what would happen if he left. My own guess is that he wants to get away from the responsibility of actually running the government. And in order to do that, the logical thing is to become president again. That's a more ceremonial role, and one where he can be a little bit divorced from what's going on and also blame it. And the problem for Putin at the moment is things are going wrong in Russia, and people blame the government for that, and he's the head of government.
So what about the new Cold War? I mean, is it exaggerating to say there's a new Cold War because you've depicted Russia as pretty weak economically and inefficient in other ways and so on? Is there a new Cold War?
Well, there is a new Cold War, but it's not like the old one. It's not a global military confrontation between superpowers, which is what the old one was. It's more subtle than that. It's more about banks than about tanks. It's about the way in which the vast amount of money that Russia's made over the last 8 years comes swirling through our financial system, with bankers, accountants, lawyers and other people all turning a blind eye to where the money comes from and how it was obtained. That's the real problem. I think the difference between when I was writing the book and now is clearly that oil was $160 a barrel then, and now it's about 40. And that's made life more difficult for the Kremlin. I would argue it doesn't necessarily mean that Russia is going to be nicer and more easy to deal with. There's a fashionable theory that because they're desperate, they're going to have to be nice. I don't agree with that. I think as they get desperate, they may become more unpleasant.
And where would their targets be? Would they go back to a popular move like attacking Georgia again, or Ukraine, or?
I certainly think another war in Georgia is possible. It's even maybe likely, because all the potential is there, and they see that the West has basically abandoned Georgia. I don't think that's quite true, but that's what they think they see, and that would be a way of getting some popularity at home and poking the West in the eye once again by humiliating one of our allies. There's a kind of blame game going on inside Russia. It's almost like a pinball machine with a ball rattling round, not quite sure where to land. So do we blame the Westerners? Do we blame the Western liberal economic policies and the banks and all that? Do we blame maybe illegal immigrants inside Russia? Do we blame Russia's neighbours? Do we blame greedy bankers in Russia? Do we maybe blame Putin? That's still unclear. That blame is yet to settle.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And Russia, of course, is on the verge of losing its football manager as well to Chelsea. Another blow to Russia. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Dave.
And that's all for this week. Next week we have a very special program for you. We'll be hearing from the President of Nicaragua, Daniel Ortega, from former US presidential nominee John Kerry, and the legendary actor Robert De Niro. You saw him in the Oscars. See him here in a week's time. And more besides. See you then.